Even as the world mourned and paid tribute, the quiet machinery of the monarchy never stopped turning. A life of duty had ended, but another had already begun. The crown had passed, not just as a symbol, but as a burden layered with expectation, history, and unseen complications. For the woman who had waited decades to step fully into the role, the moment should have marked a sense of arrival. Instead, it brought something far more complex, an invisible boundary drawn not in public, but behind palace doors. Because at the very moment power seemed to settle into place, whispers began to circulate. Not loud, not confirmed, but persistent enough to be noticed. Something had shifted. A quiet decision, unannounced yet deeply significant, had been made. And at the center of it all were objects that had long outgrown their material value, jewels that carried memory, identity, and a story the world refuses to forget. These were not ordinary royal assets. They were pieces once worn by a woman whose presence still lingers in every corridor of public memory. And now those same pieces had reportedly been placed under a form of protection so strict, so deliberate, that it changed their meaning entirely. They were no longer adaptable, no longer flexible. They were, in every sense, frozen in time. For years, royal jewelry has never truly been static. Stones have been reset, designs altered, histories reshaped to reflect the present moment. It is part of the monarchy's quiet evolution, a tradition hidden beneath elegance. But this time, something was different. This time, the rule was absolute. No changes, no reinterpretation, no modern touch. And the timing raised more questions than answers. Because as this restriction quietly took hold, there had been subtle signs of transformation elsewhere. A shift in image, a careful selection of appearances, a gradual movement toward redefining identity through symbolism. Every jewel worn had begun to carry intention, each appearance a message without words. It was a strategy, quiet but unmistakable. Yet just as that transformation seemed to gain momentum, it stopped. Not publicly, not dramatically, but with the kind of stillness that signals intervention. The alleged protection order didn't remove access, but it removed control. The pieces could still be worn, still be displayed, but never altered, never claimed in a new form. And that distinction changed everything. Because in a world where symbolism is power, the inability to reshape that symbolism is a limitation that cannot be ignored. What made this shift even more striking was the silence surrounding it. No announcement, no confirmation, no denial, just a quiet acceptance that something had been put in place. And inside the monarchy, silence rarely means absence. It often signals precision, because this was not just about preserving objects, it was about preserving meaning. Each piece, exactly as it was, carried a narrative that could not be rewritten. Every diamond, every setting, every design remained tied to the woman who had once worn them, ensuring that her story would continue to be told, unchanged. And in that stillness, a deeper question began to take shape. Who was this protection truly for? On the surface, it appeared to safeguard history, but beneath that, it created boundaries. It ensured that no matter who wore those jewels next, they could never fully redefine them. They would always be carrying something that belonged, emotionally and symbolically, to someone else. For a monarchy built on continuity, this was not unusual. But for those living within its structure, it introduced a quiet tension, one that could not be addressed openly, only managed carefully. While the present adjusted to these invisible lines, the future seemed to be taking shape with quiet certainty. Because preservation is never just about the past, it is always about what comes next. And in this case, what comes next carries its own significance. By locking these pieces in their original form, they become more than relics. They become time capsules, waiting for a generation that will inherit them without needing to redefine them. A generation that will wear them not as something borrowed or reshaped, but as something whole, untouched, and complete. This is where the deeper strategy begins to reveal itself. Because when legacy is preserved this carefully, it is not accidental. It is intentional. It ensures that certain stories remain intact, immune to change, protected from reinterpretation. And as attention subtly shifts, as roles quietly evolve, it becomes clear that influence is not always exercised in the present moment. Sometimes, it is secured in advance, built into structures that will only fully reveal their purpose over time. In the end, what appears to be a simple act of preservation carries far greater weight, because within the monarchy, control is rarely taken in obvious ways. It is adjusted, refined, and embedded into decisions that seem, on the surface, almost insignificant. This was one of those decisions, a move that did not challenge authority directly, yet redefined its limits, a change that did not alter appearances immediately, yet reshaped the meaning behind them. And most most importantly, a choice that ensured some legacies remain untouched, no matter who steps into the spotlight. But such decisions never exist in isolation. They ripple outward, creating reactions that may never be seen publicly, but are deeply felt within the system itself. Because when something is preserved so firmly, it inevitably restricts something else. And that is where the real story continues. Not in what has already happened, but in what follows. In the quiet responses, the subtle adjustments, and the unseen negotiations that define the balance of power. Because in a world where everything is measured, even silence speaks.